Hey guys, another episode of Beyond the Listing today, and the first one with my co-host. It's a play on
Co-host
words.
and co-host.
Edwin. So, Edwin, you want to introduce our delightful guest?
Yeah, today we have Ramis here, a realtor and Airbnb host, hosting both in here, Ontario and Arizona. We met a while ago through a mastermind. Was it a mastermind or a mastermind? Cashflow Tribe. So if anyone been on that, would probably have seen us before. So
beautiful. Welcome.
Welcome, Ramis. So
Thank you so much for having me, guys. I appreciate the invite, and I think today's episode is going to be full with a lot of golden nuggets. So I think anyone who's watching this episode, they're going to get tons of value.
Yeah, I think you literally stole my next lines. I was going to say this is going to be a very special episode. It's going to be very good because there's going to be a lot of insight, and it's a very compelling story. And let's start with your story. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you claw your way up to the top?
Yeah, so rise to the top, just humble beginnings. I was immigrated to Canada when I was 16. I did high school over here, went to school, did all that stuff. And then right during COVID time, I started falling in love with the idea of entrepreneurship and just learning more about like asset building. I was reading Rich Dad Poor Dad at that time too. That was the first book that gave me my breakthrough. I remember I used to do security jobs. So I was going to school, I was doing security job at nighttime, and one day I bought this book and I started reading it. And the biggest thing that I got out of that book was that you should be building assets all the time. Like, you should take your money rather than spending it on like cars and like stupid things. Like,
cars are assets. Don't talk shit about cars.
Good cars only. Good cars.
Cars, man.
I love cars too. So, that was like a thing for me. And then I was just reading my book and I went on my phone and I found out about Cashflow Tribe. There was this webinar that these guys were hosting. It was like $200 for like 2 days. The idea of the webinar was that how you can buy a property or how you can do a deal without like any of your money. And I always used to think that, it's probably a scam. I think it's just like a bullshit. Like, I don't know, like if this is going to work out, but I end up buying that ticket and I was like, now I'm exposed to this world, and that's pretty much how I got started.
Well, that's great. Sorry about that. You talked about entrepreneurship. What motivated you to take that route?
So, for me, my dad was like the biggest inspiration, I would say. My dad, like, I always saw him working in real estate. Like, I see a lot of other like successful people too. And like, one common trait that all these successful entrepreneurs they had something to do with real estate. And that was like the switch of my mind. Since like I was like in high school over here too, like I always been a kid who was like into entrepreneurial journey. I used to do car detailing when I was in high school. I started doing window washing business as well.
So you've been a hustler since the beginning. I love it.
Yeah, exactly. Even back home, like, I was like into origami. So I used to like learn how to like make like paper flowers, and then I would just like sell that to like anyone who's like passing by or like my relatives or something like that. So always had that idea that you should create something and then have some sort of relationship that thing provides value to the other person, and you just sell that. So that's always the idea that has been. Same thing with car detailing, same thing with window cleaning business. It was always something that was fixing other person's problem.
Love it. Tell me about the first deal or the first client that you closed. And the thing that I'm most interested is how did it make you feel? Like, what was that feeling? What was the thought process when that happened?
Yeah.
And it can be any of those things, like early on or in the business that you're currently, what we're discussing right now.
Yeah. So, you know what? I'm going to talk to you guys about my first deal that I did. It was a wholesaling deal. I didn't use any of my money. So like $0, nothing spent on marketing either. I understood the business at that point. I knew what acquisition and disposition side of the business is, because in real estate, like especially when it comes to deals, like you have to be really good at acquisition, but then you also have to be good at disposition. So for wholesaling, if someone doesn't know what wholesaling is,
I was just gonna ask. I was like, you're talking about something very interesting, but I have no idea what's happening.
Yeah. So wholesaling is basically you go you find under market value properties. Most of the time these properties are off market, and then you basically you're buying that property, but you have a clause in that agreement that says that you can assign this contract to anybody prior to the closing.
Oh, that's very interesting. I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah, so in
That's
modern, like in today's world, those are called assignments.
Okay,
Yeah, so
those I know. Those I know. Yeah.
but mostly we see that like in pre-construction side.
Exactly, that's where I saw it. On
Yeah,
few of
but
my
not a
friends.
lot on resale side. And I guess like one thing that I did get out of Cash Flow Tribe webinar was that you necessarily don't need a real estate license to do something in real estate, and that's why wholesaling was a gateway for me in real estate. But yeah, like my first deal, I remember I found this seller. They were old couple, super old. They had a bungalow in Cambridge. It was like a nice bungalow, 1,500 square feet with finished basement as well, separate entrance, and they just wanted to get rid of the property.
How did you find them? How did you source them? How did they come across your table?
Door knocking.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
wild.
Yeah.
Bandit sign. That was my first deal.
Yeah.
The what?
Door-
what?
Bandit signs. So these plastic little signs you put on the
Yeah.
lawn,
Oh, wow.
and you just put them in these very run-down neighborhoods, because
Yeah.
that's where the
Wild.
deals are.
You guys are hustlers, eh?
Yeah, so
Good
I
for you.
used to do door knocking. So I found this lead through door knocking. They wanted to sell, they wanted to move out. This was like 2022, right at the end of COVID. They wanted to move out. They were like super sick, and they were like, we just want to get rid of this property, but we don't want anyone to come and see the house, because they were embarrassed on how the house looked. Like the roof had a leakage, like bathroom was like pretty shit. So I was like, yeah, that's fine. Like, I like at the end of the day, my investors are going to come and have a look at it, but it wouldn't be like how real estate agents do it. Like, it wouldn't be like an open house, or like, people are just like booking showings and they're coming. Only person who's going to come and see your house is going to be a qualified investor who's ready to buy this property. And I was super transparent with them. I was like, I'm just the middle guy. I work with a lot of investors, so my job here is to make sure that I find an investor for this property first who's bringing you cash, so they don't have a mortgage, and secondly, they're able to close within like 10 days, because they wanted to sell like within 10 days. They were ready to move out, and they were basically ready to go. So yeah, like, I found this deal. I got them under contract. If you are asking me numbers, I can quickly run down with numbers too. So I got it under contract for $375,000. It was a Cambridge bungalow, brick bungalow, separate entrance, deep sized lot, and then I assigned that contract for $425,000. So that was my
Jesus.
first deal.
Well done,
Yeah.
well done.
That's a pretty good turnaround. That's what
Yeah.
people make in a year sometimes.
Exactly, right? So like when I got that paycheck, I was like, what the fuck is this? Is this even real?
That's
Like,
wild. Yeah.
yeah, but one thing that I
Especially for the first one to kind of.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
and
It's
you
good.
know, like I wasn't like your average guy who went to like high school, and like like I've always been like, I had a hate and like love kind of relationship with studies. I never like going to high school or college.
understand what
So
you mean, yeah.
I was like, I always wanted to do something that doesn't use my like education. Like, it has to do more with my skills. I guess
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what the main mindset was for me.
Yeah, education these days very regimented, and it's not for everybody. But that's a different conversation. We can have a podcast just on that.
100%.
Yeah, and what projects are you focusing on right now? You mentioned real estate. Obviously, you're here for the
Yes.
Airbnb hosting, co-hosting stuff. Like,
Yeah.
what are the main avenues that you're pursuing these days?
So, I mean, at this point, I've been doing real estate for like close to 5 years now. I started with wholesaling. I got my real estate license after 2 years, because I was just working with a lot of clients, and they were like, what, let's start looking for like more opportunities, and I just thought it was the right time. And then when I got my real estate license, one of my client was actually doing Airbnbs, and that's how I got introduced to Airbnbs. But I think my main focus, what mainly has been, is on the acquisition side, so sourcing deals, whether that's for my investor clients or my retail clients. And now I'm focusing more on Airbnb side as well, because I did understood that how passively this business can be if you build it the right way, obviously. So
I hear it a lot from people.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem passive at all to me. What we're doing is extremely hands-on. So this
Yeah.
is a great conversation. Maybe me and this guy, we can learn something from you, and
course.
we're gonna be a little more chill. Otherwise, for us, it's like
Yeah.
teams are working steam is going through everybody's heads, and anyways, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Well, that's cool. That's a nice segue into, I guess, the next section. But you're mostly focusing on, just to recap, it's the real estate.
Yes.
It's selling and buying.
Yes.
And it's the kind of short-term rental.
That's
property
right.
management. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else, like, secret Formula One racing driver or something like
I
that?
love cars, so like as I was talking, like I love cameras too. So like I think now, because I'm making that money, like I can, afford to buy like nice cameras and like just rent like nice cars. So I think the next chapter of my life, I want to explore some of my hobbies and passions too, and I think tech is going to be the one that I'm going to start looking into.
Beautiful.
So like for your first property, from what I remember, it was in Niagara. Is that correct? And how did you end up getting that deal?
So my first short-term rental property was in Niagara Falls. Just so everyone's on the same page, it was illegal, so it was not a legal dwelling.
We have a criminal in the house, okay?
There you go. CRA, just don't come back at me.
I think it's a different Department of Justice that goes up to for that, but anyways.
So yeah, so the first one was in Niagara. Actually, the way how we got that property was through just networking. I know one investor, she owned this multifamily in that like area, and I was working with this. So I got an Airbnb mentor at that time. I paid him like some fees, and then what he used to do was he used to source deals at that time. Because it was our first deal and we were just getting our foot in the game, he proposed an idea where he was like, hey, like, why don't I teach you guys how to skip the ropes? And then I can also help you find a property. And then luckily we found this property through him, and it was a 3-bedroom apartment in a 10-plex. So our rent was like super cheap. And then secondly, since it was 3 bedrooms, we used to get like a lot more occupancy because people would afford it. And I would say like it was one of those unicorn deals where we thought about it a lot, but when we got it, we were like, yo, this is like a game changer. And through that one unit, we were able to get like 2 more units in Arizona.
What was the game changer again?
Just like the fact that the rent was so low, and then the revenue that we were generating from like a property like that was like significantly higher. So just to put context.
So this was an arbitrage, right?
Yes.
So basically, for our listeners who don't know what arbitrage is, it's when you rent a property and then you do short-term rentals in that rental property. So whatever you make, the difference that you make between what you make short-term and what you pay to the landlord is your profit. So there's a big discrepancy there, right?
Yep.
Right.
So I think like arbitrage is the way to do it.
You're talking to 2 co-hosts. We're not on your team, man.
Yeah. So I
but
mean,
that's why you're here, because we want to hear we're
Yeah.
learning too with this through the whole process.
100%.
After this conversation, me and this guy might go and rent like 20 units in Arizona, and that's it. It's like, no, we're not doing that. But it's still very interesting to hear that side of things, because also you're saying, we'll get to that. That's a very important point, that it's a very passive income, because it's the farthest thing from the truth for me personally, for my team, because we're like non-stop working day and night. So it's very interesting to hear when I hear people saying, oh, I spend 5 hours a week doing this. I'm like, and what world is that? Not mine. So it's always nice to hear. So we'll get to that, but that's very interesting. That's very cool.
Yeah, Niagara Falls was the gateway to the Airbnb space for me. The reason why we got that property was because like one thing that any Canadian has to do is that I guess they have to go see Niagara Falls, right? So when we got that property, we were like, yo, like we're gonna do like just fine, because just the fact that it's close to Niagara Falls. Honestly, it was like 10-minute walks from Niagara Falls, and it was just amazing. So it worked out perfectly.
Very cool. Very cool. In terms of just ballpark numbers, what was that profit or revenue that you were making, whatever you were making minus the expense of the rental? What was it like approximately a month? You don't need to give us exact numbers.
For sure. So an average, like our monthly expenses was just the rent, because it was included in all the utilities and etc. So our rent was like close to $1,700, and it was 3 bedrooms apartments. It was 3-bedroom like a multi-family unit. So our revenue was like close to, it differed month to month, but on average basis we were like anywhere from $3,800 to $4,200. Some months when it was like spring, or like let's say it's like Victoria Day or something like that, we were like milking out that property.
Yeah, so on average you were making $3,000 a month.
Yeah,
that's huge, because based on my knowledge,
Yeah.
If you're making $1,000 in arbitrage
Yes.
to 1,500, you're doing very well. So this was a
Exactly.
this was a really good kind of find. That's cool.
Yeah,
That's
and
very nice.
the reason why it worked out perfectly fine was because we were basically paying 1 bedroom's rent for 3-bedroom apartment.
But you were not allowed to do short-term rentals in that area, technically, right?
Yes.
And I think they've tightened those regulations
Oh, yeah.
significantly, so you wouldn't be able to do that. So you kind of snuck under the radar, and yeah.
Yeah, so that's what happened after a year. So we did that for 1 year, and then one day my neighbor just got mad for some reason because guest did something stupid. He ended up calling the city. So the city came, city just dropped like a warning sticker, and they're like, hey, like you have 30 days to like, either convert this into a long-term rental or, just shut it off, because if we see you doing this again, we're going to give you $5,000 fine.
Yeah, and then it's not worth it.
Exactly.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it lasted. Well, that's the problem with arbitrage. You can get stuck if they did a half year through your lease. You'd have to either default on your lease, so you just be paying and not making any money. So I mean, there's benefits. Okay, so this was the first thing. What were the next steps in your logic in terms of doing the short-term rentals and everything else?
When I got the ticket from the city, or like the warning sticker, that was just like a switch in my mind where I was like, okay, you know what? We gotta liquidate this, sell all the furniture, and take whatever money that we have and start working in US.
So that was the flip.
Exactly.
Like that, eh?
Because my whole perspective was that if we're working so hard on these units and like they're not legal, or let's say there's some sort of like issue going on with the city, it's just not worth it. I can take that money, I can invest that in US, $10,000 USD can get me a beautiful apartment with all the furnitures and stuff, and at the end of the day it's legal. And plus, it's like I'm earning in USD.
Yeah, it's always nice. I was just in Miami, and I could feel it. I could feel it a lot. It's the same. Everything is the same price. It's just in USD, which is pretty much at this point in time 1.5 times more. Did you then move everything to the States, or you still did some stuff here? And do you have any properties here in Canada right now?
Yes. So right now I'm just helping a couple of my clients manage their properties. They bought the properties with me. They were investor clients.
As a co-host, pretty much.
Yeah.
Or you're still renting it from them. And
no. Just like as a management, like.
There you go. Now you're on our team. Okay.
Yeah. So I think like it really comes down to properties as well. Like I love the idea of co-hosting, but it just comes down to if there's enough piece of the pie for all of us, right?
Yeah, it's a different business model. It's perfectly both.
Exactly. With arbitrage, one thing that I do like is that because it's basically you. Like if you don't get bookings, if you don't get reservations, you're gonna have to pay out of your pocket.
Yeah, and I mean you have only one client that's a guest. With co-hosting, you're dealing with two clients, a guest and the property owner.
Exactly.
And it's a lot more to manage. So, but there is a lot less risk, right? Because you're not investing your money. If it sits empty, you're not losing money. It's the owner that's. And again, the goal is to have maximum occupancy, and we try and we succeed very well. And I know this guy is very good at that.
Yes.
There's benefits, and of course, and that's why you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's why you're kind of taking more icing on the cake from the top. There is a higher chance of making more money, and there's a higher chance of getting screwed.
High risk, high return. So.
Yeah.
But what led you to choose Arizona as the state to operate in versus all the other states? Like Anton's looking at Miami.
Yes.
I've been looking at Arizona.
Yeah.
Also, what led you to?
I guess for me, Arizona, like ASU was the biggest one. ASU is like the second biggest university in like that like area itself. Weather was like amazing. Like I see a lot. Like I used to meet a lot of Canadians over here that they would be like, hey, like during the winter time we're in Arizona, and I would be like, why is that? Like either it's like Miami, Florida, or like it's like Arizona for like a lot of people. So I guess that was one thing for me. And then a lot of sports events happens over there too. Super Bowl, the year when we got into like Arizona, that was the year when they were hosting Super Bowl. When we got our first unit, the money that we made during that month on Super Bowl, I was like, this is unreal. Even if this happens like next year, or like after 2 years, and I have like 6 Airbnbs at that time, I think the amount of money that I'm gonna make just from that month, it's gonna like feed me for the rest of the year, right?
So that's wild. Did you do a little bit of research?
Yes.
Prior to that, what was the research like? What areas were you looking at, and what was the thought process over there?
So I guess like in order for us to understand like what research goes behind when choosing the city is that you need to get really clear with the idea that what kind of property are you going for.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. It was going to be my next question. There you go.
So for me, my focus was just 1-bedroom apartments, like strictly condos. So I wanted to stick with like bigger cities. So Phoenix, Scottsdale, Tempe. I was also looking in Chicago at that time. So the goal was to like be close to like bigger cities, just because the occupancy level that you get in those cities are much higher than like, you know, second tier cities, for example, like Flagstaff or like any other places in Arizona. So that was like the main thing. And then again, like making sure that it's like a city where there's a big university, because the kind of clientele that I am attracting right now are the people who are dropping their kids off to university and they need like a place to live for like a couple of weeks and stuff like that. So that was like main for me.
Why 1 bedrooms, not 2 bedrooms? Because, for example, I'll tell you that in Toronto, 2-bedroom condos and 3-bedroom condos perform significantly better than 1-bedroom condos. There's a lot, and I can give you a long scientific explanation of that. You will need to rent more hotel rooms in order to fit the same amount of people. So the savings and ability to cook for yourself for, you know, families that are going to stay in a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom condos where it sleeps 6 to 8 people depending on the layout is way more advantageous. So you will have a lot easier time renting it and maximizing the profit. So why did you choose, not to say that 1-bedroom, we have a few 1-bedrooms and they perform very well, but it's the 2-bedrooms that are just like stellar, right? So why were 1-bedrooms more interesting?
I think the main metrics that we were looking for was our occupancy. I just felt like filling in 1-bedroom apartment would be much easier than filling up like a 2-bedroom apartment. Plus keeping in mind that the city that we were operating in was like a city where, you know, people are not bringing their whole families there. Like they're just like coming there for like a week or so. So like a lot of clientele that we were getting, those are like corporate travelers, people who are just traveling solo or they're with their significant others. So for those reasons, plus like we did, because our Niagara property was 3 bedrooms. I guess the main thing that I look for is that the rent needs to make sense. If the 2-bedroom rent is like significantly higher than 1-bedroom rent, I would still stick with 1-bedroom, because my business is that I need to make sure that my expenses are as low as possible. So by the end of the month, like my like revenues are higher and like the net that I'm putting in my pocket is significantly much more.
But you'll also be able to rent the 2-bedroom for a lot higher. So at the end of the day, you might be actually netting more with the 2-bedroom.
I don't have strictly anything against 2-bedrooms. Right now, I'm looking for 2-bedroom apartments like in different states. We started with 1-bedroom. We actually got really lucky with our first property in Arizona. We found a furnished unit. So we end up like, you know, just getting that 1-bedroom, and we were like, hey, like, you know, this unit is already furnished. All we have to do is just take the photos, put this on Airbnb and see how it performs.
And what you do is basically you go to property owners directly at a condo and you say, hey, I want to rent it from you. I'm a business. You don't have to worry about anything in terms of like I'll pay you on time. You don't have to worry about these things. I'm going to Airbnb it. And what do they say to that? Because a lot of people will be like, I don't want to have my unit on Airbnb. Why would I do that? I do it myself.
So that's one challenge that I face like with today. And I guess like just coming from sales, one thing that I did realize is that no is just a way of getting a yes. So, you know, I've always been like a persuader. So typically I reach out to property managers. They are the toughest to work with because they have that safeguard already on. But, you know, just being like straight up, transparent, honest with them that, hey, like, you know, we operate this as a business. So at the end of the day, if anything, we're the ones who are doing favor to you because we're not like your regular tenant. So we're not missing payments. We're taking care of the property. We're making sure that anytime guests checks out, property has been cleaned like professionally. So, you know, it's kind of...
You don't need to sell me on that. I sell people on this. I get it. Right? But it makes sense, of course.
But the thing is, like, you have to show them that it's a win-win for all of us.
Yeah. And you obviously have it written in your lease contract that you're out to sublease and do an Airbnb there.
Yes. So every lease has an addendum that that gets attached is just one page addendum that says that we're allowed to do Airbnb, we're allowed to post this listing on different platforms including MLS in the case if Airbnb gets banned or some reason like that. Second clause that I also mentioned is that for some reason if city prohibits the short-term rental use, then we can get out of this lease right away. One more thing that I started adding now is that any units that we're getting, we're also adding like video security features, so like, you know, cameras and stuff like that. So we also mentioned that on the lease that we're going to be putting like one security camera outdoor. So
walk us through a little bit of that background thinking. Okay, you have this one property, right? Because you obviously started with one unit in Arizona, or you went for like few right away.
No, so
yeah, so you know, you get the one, and what are the next steps over there? How do you get to what you said, 4-6 units that you have in Arizona?
Yeah, so right now we're at 8.
Oh, there you go.
We're signing up 4 more in the next 2 months. So
are they also going to be in Arizona, those 4 more, or
no? So different
are you going to give us spill the beans where
sure,
was the other place?
Sure. So I'm looking in Virginia. There's few cities in Virginia that has been like stood out for me. Alexandria is the big, like that's the one that I'm looking at, Alexandria. But when I was starting out in Arizona, the whole mindset was to have like couple of properties in different complexes just to see which complex is performing the best. And then the goal was to find the one that's performing the best and then scale, double down on those complexes. So when I started out, I got 1 unit in one complex, and then I got 2 units in different complex, and then I got 2 more in different complex. And then in the next like 2 years, the ones that were performing the lowest, we started like dropping them off and just liquidating that to like other Airbnb hosts if they want to take that over. And we just started focusing on one apartment complex that was performing the best for us.
Now I'm interested in learning about Toronto versus Arizona, right? I mean, have you properties you're managing, you mentioned 2, are they in Toronto or they're in other regions?
Yes, so one of them is in Toronto. It's actually a basement. Client bought a investment property. They wanted to rent out the basement to a long-term tenant, and then I proposed the idea that, hey, like, you know, why don't you just start looking into short-term rentals. So I have one basement, and then the other property is in Milton. Toronto, like, I love the numbers that Toronto generates for you. I have nothing against that. I think a lot of hosts from like US, they actually come to Toronto to do arbitrage here. Yeah, I know some of them who are like in masterminds, and they're always looking for deals in Toronto too.
That's wild, because
how do you do primary residence?
Exactly. There's STR regulations. Like, I mean, I wouldn't want to engage in arbitrage in Toronto because I can't clone myself, and you're going to need to get multiple licenses, and it's just going to
be... So that's the reason why Toronto was like, you know, not always been the number 1 priority for me, just because the red tape that we have. Even if you buy a property, like there's like now you cannot show expenses for that property if you're running it as a short-term rental.
You can if you are a primary resident over there and you have the license, you can show it. And if you're not, and you don't have the license, then you can't. And then they did it to discourage people from just, you know, doing short-term rentals.
True.
That's a bit of a complicated issue. So
and then 180-day cap too, right?
Yeah, 180-day cap.
I think the only
there's ways around it. Actually, a really wild thing, I'll tell you. That this season we did a bit of a test. So we have some clients, they have their units in the summer, and they just go away to, let's say we have these wonderful couple, they go to Argentina for the winter time. So we are using their short-term rental days during the winter. And there's a few other units like that. And what we've noticed is that actually when we rent midterm, which is 28 days plus, that's when you don't use your short-term rental days, we've seen performance that's actually sometimes better than when you do short-term rental in the winter, because there's not a lot of demand for short-term rental in the winter. And the prices are just so low. Like the properties that are going for $350 a night in the summer, they're going for $115 barely renting in the winter, right? Because you're competing with a lot of people. But the midterm rentals, they're at like sometimes $3,500 for 1 bedroom. That's a good price that we got. Sometimes it's a bit lower, but at the end of the day, the client is actually making a few $100s more from a midterm rental without using any of the short-term rental days, which is wild to me. We saw that, and some properties do perform a little bit better than that, but there were a few units that we did short-term rentals for in the winter that got outperformed when we did midterm rentals and saved the days for the summer. So there's a lot of things in Toronto that can work well as well. But sorry, keep going. Like Arizona versus Toronto, and again regulations. That's a good conversation to have. Like what's up with Arizona and regulations?
Yeah, so Arizona regulation is pretty straightforward. Property has to, like, there's some sort of like fire code that you have to follow, making sure that the exits are like visible, that kind of stuff, like basic fire code, making sure there's fire extinguisher, fire detector, that kind of stuff. After that, you just have to reach out to the city, register the unit. There's 3 criteria that they have to look after. So property manager has to notify, let's say if you're operating like a 1-bedroom apartment, then anyone on that floor needs to be notified that this unit is a short-term rental. It has to be registered within the county as well. So federal is different, state is different, and then counties are different. So your business needs to be registered with federal government, which means that you need to have an EIN number. And then after that, you need to be registered with the state, which is the state of Arizona. And then within the state, there's a counties as well. So you have to be just registered. It's just more like paperwork in terms of application, but there's not red tape. Like there's not like a day cap or anything like
they let you do business. You gotta register, you just gotta have it all official, and then you're free to do whatever you want. What about the condos there? Here there's very few condos, and actually in Miami the same thing, very few condos that allow short-term rentals. What about in Arizona? Like, do they all allow short-term rentals? Are there only, again, number the same thing?
Yeah, same sort of thing, but I think it's better than Toronto for sure. More options than Toronto. Over there, the whole thing is like, over here we have more issues with like our municipality, right? Like we have more.
Yeah, they're trying to go after you. They're just literally there to hustle you and to kill your business.
But in Arizona, like the real vultures are the HOAs. Those are the ones who are actually causing trouble. They are the ones who don't like short-term rental. So let's say if you're working with a complex that has a lenient HOA, like they're more friendly.
That's property management.
Yeah.
For our Canadian listeners.
It's the condo board. Yeah, it's a condo board.
Yeah, it's condo board, and they are the ones who actually cause the trouble. But the municipality and the city itself, they're super nice.
Yeah, because in the States, they let you do business.
Exactly, that's the whole.
Unlike
thing.
Here.
Yeah, and
hopefully that's gonna turn around.
And I guess like that's one thing that I also wanted to like just mention, like. Overall, like if you're a business owner in States, you have much more options to get business loans, grants as compared to over here. Like let's say if you go to bank over here and you want to get a loan, they're going to see at your personal credit. They're going to see like, how you have been over the last few months or like years. But like in States, all they see is that your LLC needs to be registered for this much time, and then you can qualify for like your basic loans.
And you obviously registered a company there and went through this whole process, and it's operating beautifully.
Yeah, exactly. So it's some like, I guess there's ways around that as well. So we just hired like a good accountant who knew better than us, and we said that, hey, like, listen, we're not bringing any US dollars over here because right now our business plan is that for the next 3 years, we're just reinvesting all of that money. He actually advised us that based on the tax bracket that you guys have over here and like what things that you guys have going on in the corporation, it's just better that you operate as a Canadian corp rather than operating as a LLC.
Oh, wow. So you didn't actually open a company there?
No. So we just got an EIN number and we're operating as a Canadian corp, and any property managers or property owners that we work with, we let them know that, hey, we're based out of Canada. This is our Canadian corp, but we have established business in US.
How about credit score?
We don't have a credit score right now. We're working on it. In order for you to get a credit score, you need to either have an LLC or you need to be like a green card holder or like someone who's living in States.
Let's get to the most fun part that I'm interested in, operations.
Sure.
You said it's a hands-off kind of experience, and it's a passive income.
Yeah.
How does that work?
So when you look at business, there's so many things that goes behind the business. There's marketing, there's operations, there's like, R&D, there's like reach out. I feel like Airbnb business itself, yes, like it is a little bit more hectic. Like you have to be on your phone and whatnot, but you're still far better than any other businesses because Airbnb does marketing for you. Verbo does marketing for you. So you're not necessarily like showing off your property to like shit ton of people in hope that you're going to get business. main thing is your operation, and I think if you're good at delegating and you can trust people, you have good team around you, I think this business can be passive. On day-to-day basis, maybe I open my phone for like, a couple of hours a day just to see what's going on, but it also comes down to you as an operator, like how micromanaged you want to be, right? If you want everything to be perfectly fine, then you can spend as many hours as you
That's
can.
me. Hi.
Right? But if you have like a standard and you're actually want to scale this business, then there's a point where you have to draw the line and you have to be like, hey, like, this is not worthwhile my time, and I should start focusing on things that's actually going to bring me more business. So
Can you tell me, share with us what your team looks like right now?
yeah, so when I started out, there was VAs. I hired and fired like close to 20 VAs in the last 2 years, I would say. I just got sick and tired of the VA whole thing. We did build our SOPs out, so like we did have like a sheet that has like all the, in case like if anything goes wrong, what should one should do. And then last year what we did is we just hired an agency. So now we have like close to 12 people in our WhatsApp group, and those guys are always working around the day.
Right. A quick question around the agency. Do they just work with the guests, or they're also working with the team, the cleaners and everybody
Everything. So start to end, cleaners, handymans, repairs, carpet cleaners.
So you basically hired a property management company.
Yeah, and but the thing is like they're not like local here. Because if they were local here, I would be paying all of my like dividends to them. But they're based out of like where I am from, Pakistan, and we pay fraction of the cost that people pay for property managers.
Right. So this is a very good kind of segue into the big question. Yeah. You're not physically on the ground. Yes. I am personally facing a lot of issues. I don't want to say a lot of issues, but when it's a high season, you sometimes face issues where if you're not on the ground, it's not going to get resolved at the same level. Yes. Right? How do you mitigate, and especially now, been in Miami for a month and a half and really understanding the landscape there, it's significantly worse than Toronto. Like you have to have somebody on the ground, a property manager or the operations director, in order to go to the property if the cleaner canceled and like literally figure it out on the spot, because the guests are checking in 3 hours. Yes. And if you're not there, then people are not picking up. Like your guests are going to come to a dirty property. So how do you manage that remotely?
Because when I got into wholesaling, one thing that was always being discussed is that you have to have a really good power team around you. So my mindset was like, I need to have a cleaner, I need to have a handyman, I need to have a backup cleaner, I need to have a backup handyman, and then I also need to have someone who's good with tech. So let's say if there's anything that I need them to integrate, that kind of stuff, they're always there. So I always have like backup people that can go at the property if they need it to be. The main thing is that you just have to treat those people nice, just have to give them some sort of like responsibility, and kind of encourage them that, hey, like this is like something that we're building for a longer picture, and like one day if you help us out right now, it doesn't have to be like per hour, it can be per job. So anytime you need them, you just pay them per job. But one day when you are at a level where you need to be like hiring like a salary worker, those are the ones who are gonna get the preference, right? So I guess like that's really what it was for me, just making sure that I have enough people. If shit goes to the south, they're there for me.
You've had situations obviously with multiple properties, and how did those people help you handle them?
Yeah, so fun story actually.
Give us spill the beans.
Yeah, so the worst guest that I had was so it was a 1-bedroom apartment. This guy, he booked it on Airbnb, and then he brought like 7 other guys and 2 other girls to the B&B. I was talking about this with Ed as well. Like they were partying, they smoked weed in the apartment. It was like fully trashed, and then when the checkout time come, they're not checking out.
Yeah, so there you go. Like, how do you do that? If you're on the grounds, you get there with a baseball bat and you're like, I'm gonna call the cops, get out of here. I've done that before. And when you're however many miles away, you're like, what the hell do I do, right? Like you feel helpless, and it's a lot of stress probably.
Yeah, and that was like the most stressful situation because we had a booking for the same day as well.
Yeah, that's wild.
So like, like checkout time is at 10, guests are in the property until like 1 o'clock, check-in is at 4. These guys are not leaving. So I called my cleaners and I said them, hey, like you have to get to this property, bang the door, like go inside by the window, I don't care, but you have to speak with these guys. My cleaner goes there, she knocks the door, she speaks with the guy. They're like, yeah, we're leaving, but it's like 2 p.m. already, right? There's like 2 hours remaining for like check-in, but room is like danking, like it smells really bad. It's just like worse, like it's a shit show. What I end up doing is I call my other handyman guy. He's I think 300 pounds or something like that. Mexican guy. He has like tattoos on his face, and he just
comes with a machete. They leave very quickly after that.
He comes at the property. He's like, all he knows is like few English words, and like he's like speaking Spanish.
Get out now.
He's just like outside the apartment, and he's just shouting, hey, like you guys have to leave. You guys have to leave. They're not leaving the property. They're still like chilling. Guy calls me, and then I was like, okay, this is it for me. I'm gonna call cops. That's what I did. I called cops. Cops showed up, and they're like, do you want us to like freaking bang the door and go inside and arrest these guys? I was like, no, just be nice, don't bang the door because it's gonna be more damages and stuff. But yeah, they took out their microphone. They did like an announcement outside the door. They're like, if we're giving you like 30 minutes, if you're not out, then we're gonna come with a warrant. It's easy to get warrants in US, and we're gonna bang this door and gonna get you guys out. Cops showed up, and then they're like, we're gonna come back because we have to go at another call. Luckily they got scared, so like in 20 minutes they left the building. But I guess the main thing was that cops had to show in order for them to get scared, and that's the only way they left the building.
Yeah, that's wild. I mean, once you had a few of those, it's a little bit like, the process, but the first one is always the scariest because you're like, I don't even know if you're going to get... What happened to the guests checking in? Did you have to postpone their check-in time, or you had to...
Yeah, so luckily we asked for a delay. So rather than checking at 4, we asked them if they can check in at 6. We bought them a coffee coupon at like a local, like a coffee store, and we're like, hey, like, just go there, have like a lunch on us, give us like a couple of hours. Since the room was like smelling really bad, I had to get like it's like a device that kind of ozone machine. So we end up buying that, made sure that the unit is turned out like in like 2 hours, new bed sheets, everything was like cleaned out. So
yeah, well, that's a wild story.
When did you shuffle them to your other units if you had in the same building?
So we didn't have occupancy like in other units that day. So we were like at a really bad position. Worst case scenario was to offer them a hotel, but they were happy. Like I feel like you also have to read the room. They were happy with like coupon from like coffee.
It's true. Yeah. Worst comes to worst, you just reach out to Airbnb and you say, listen, your guests overstayed. Yeah. You gotta like compensate these guys, and But yeah, no, that's a wild story for sure. Going back to just the differences now, like when you were explaining all the stuff, how you can manage remotely, I can see why we have a lot more work to do is because we're doing co-hosting versus arbitrage. So we do have that layer of clients who are property owners that you need to deal with. That's number one. Number two, you need to find new clients all the time because, you'll have natural churn. Somebody is not going to be, happy with the amount of money that they're making. They're going to leave. Somebody's going to sell their unit. They're going to leave, right? You might, have developed not the best relationship with some clients, and then, you're going to part ways. And you always need to replenish those people. So a lot of our efforts now thinking about it goes into like marketing. How do we market our business? How do we find new clients? Versus here, you just go and get a new property, right? Like, and when you are setting up a property, that's probably quite a bit of work. I've done multiple for clients. But once it's done, it's kind of already churning out profit, and you have these systems in place. You'll have, like you said, you have SOPs, right? That are standards of practice, or whatever they stand for, and you kind of go through that. So you do have fewer things to manage with arbitrage versus with co-hosting. So that makes sense. But still, like, to me, not having any feet on the ground, or at least like a dedicated manager that you're paying, or that you're paying them per visit. It was kind of scary leaving for a month and a half to Miami. Well, we did it during low season as well, and everything went beautifully well. That's not a word, but anyways, it turned out quite nicely, and we had people on the ground that could do work now that we've been established here for quite some time. But it's pretty cool. It's just sometimes they think that we're doing it, right? And when people are like, oh, it's a passive thing, I don't do much and I make all this money, I'm like, wow, maybe we're making it hard on ourselves. But at the same time, we have brands that are, that have value, that talk about high quality service, right?
High touch, high quality, depends on what you're trying to offer.
I feel like it also comes down to what product you guys are serving. With us, because it's 1-bedroom apartments. Like
Was more simple than a big house.
exactly, and that was like the whole business idea as well. Like for at least first few years, like we want to keep it simple. So it's actually me and my business partner who does that. So he's an engineer himself. He has little kids, and I do real estate as well. So we wanted to build this in a way where this is not taking the majority of our time away from our day. This was more something that we like it. We like US as well. So why don't we get some places in US and turn that into a way that it brings some sort of money to us.
And so the new areas that you're looking into, it's not like major cities. It's actually smaller little. It's not. I don't want to say towns, but it's smaller cities that are kind of niche and cool.
Yeah. So now the mindset has changed as well. Now the mindset is to go into the cities that are super heavily STR regulated, like Toronto. Find a market share in those areas where we can build more on top of it.
In what way?
Just like trying to stay away from the competition, right? Because when you're in a bigger city like Phoenix is like heavily saturated now, by the way. So when you're in a bigger city like Phoenix, like Chicago or like Toronto, Toronto has like a lot more red tape, so we'll leave Toronto out. But if let's say you're in Phoenix, you're competing with like a lot of other listings, and some of these guys are doing pretty good. So my mindset is just that I want to go to a place where there's less listings. If there are listings, there are probably like mom and pop Airbnb hosts.
Right.
So now we want to compete with those people and actually take the market share because we have the skills. We can make the property look nice. And
so you were saying you're staying away from major municipalities and you're going to smaller ones where you're going to be one of the few experienced hosts, right? That's pretty cool. That's a great way to approach things. And we forgot to ask the most important question. Where are your properties in Arizona? Which specific area?
So we started out with Scottsdale, Phoenix.
I hear it's very nice over there. A lot of people talk about that.
Phoenix, we started liquidating some of our properties, and now we're focusing in Tempe. Tempe is a city where there's a ASU, so it's a bigger
south of the airport, right?
Yes, close by airport. Super nice city as well. It's there's a lot of like multicultural in that city as well that you can find. So Tempe has been nice for us.
How about Mesa?
Mesa is nice. Mesa is a little bit further out from Tempe. The reason why I like Tempe is because first of all there's ASU there, and then the crowd is a little bit more younger. Mesa is like more for people who wanted to buy a property in like Arizona. They couldn't afford to buy in Phoenix or like in Tempe or Scottsdale, so now they're moving towards Mesa. Similar sort of like thing with like how people sold their homes in Toronto and then they moved to
Niagara,
Niagara or like Welland, that kind of stuff. So
well, this was super insightful. This is a lot of interesting and useful information for us to think about too. Let's fire the whole team and just get people from Pakistan to run things.
I actually have more questions about that. For your property management company that you hired, are you paying them like a monthly or are you paying them like a percentage? How does that work?
I guess like we call them customer service. We don't call them property managers, but we pay them like per listing. So $100 per listing.
And they're working 24 hours to cover it?
Taking care of daily communication, cleaners, handymans. I see them as like a toilet seat. Any shit that comes in, they just flush it out.
Wow, that's astonishing. Quick question: how quality is their work? How detail oriented is it? Because
so super good. They're super professional. They actually work with a lot of other Airbnb hosts as well. So
me and these guys were gonna be getting that number.
I had one before, but they just didn't. Because they're using a whole bunch of people to service a whole bunch. So not everyone that's coming onto shift doesn't really know the property. So maybe something for apartments is easier because it's more or less the same.
Exactly.
But for us, all our properties are different, and they don't know how to answer it, and they'll answer it unprofessionally. And we have an owner client that's looking at the message like, what is this foreign person not making any English sense?
Yeah. It would look bad. And we are co-hosts on Airbnb as well. We have a ranking on Airbnb. They're our partners, right? Or like we're rather their partners. We cannot jeopardize that with 100%. Getting a bad review. You can just start a new listing. You don't care, right? Like that's not your business model. I mean, you wouldn't want to. It's a lot of work, but I mean, I would assume, and from a lot of people that I spoke to, you including and other experienced co-hosts, that when they try and use VAs and they try and use teams like that, it just turns into a mess, and then you get. And I was joking about firing my team. They're fantastic. I love them. But I wouldn't be able to survive without them.
100%.
But it's just, this is very interesting to see, right? You're paying these people $100, which is like free labor, and they're delivering amazing results. To me, that sounds like, Disneyland. It's like, I'm talking to a TikToker that made $1 million within the first 2 weeks starting something, It's like, I'm like, I love hearing these things, but that never happens to me,
Of course. I mean, once in a while, there's always like instances where like they would send like a message that doesn't make sense, like, when you look at the English. But I think as a business owner, that's also where you come in. You have to do quality check like often. So that's what we work with. Like, all of our calls are recorded. All of our messages are like, you can document them. So it's all in front of us. That's the way how I look at it. When we hired them initially, we used to micromanage them a lot. So it was like, it was to a point where I was going through every messages that they were sending and kind of telling them that, hey, like, this is not the right wording, this is not the right usage, you should have like a little bit more like gratitude, like you should be a little bit more nice with those clients. But you just have to like show them how to skip the ropes, and once they're good at it, then you can be like a little bit more hands off.
Because the thing for us, we're expanding, right? So the team is fantastic, but the team is also like, they're not a rubber duck that can expand to an unlimited proportion. We're gonna need to implement certain things to help our team to manage these things. Like, for the first time, I faced a situation where we're probably not gonna get a 5-star review just because people decided to call at 2 a.m. and the whole team was sleeping. And it was a silly situation. They couldn't figure out how to work the logbox, which works perfectly fine. But that's aside the point. We should have 24-hour support, and with more properties, we're gonna need more people, and we can't scale. I mean, we can pay a lot of money locally, but it would make sense to offload certain things. So having these conversations are really helpful for us to understand how should we be scaling the team and leveraging team from overseas, but not losing the quality. So we might pick your brain more
for sure
later.
I think the key is to always finding like professionals to work with. That's truly one thing that I believe in. Like, if I am delegating something to somebody else, I just want to make sure that they're smarter than me at that work.
That came out very arrogant. I'm like, wow, that's a problem. That's actually a very good way of thinking. It's just difficult to source those people.
Hire fast, fire fast, man.
But I that's it, right? Like, hire fast, like, hire fast, fire fast too. And also, I guess that was one thing that I also mentioned when we were starting out this episode, is that where do you draw the line, right? It's more like, if you want everything to be perfect, then there are going to be other things that are going to fall behind the crack. And it's more like there should be a standard that doesn't matter, those standards shouldn't be loose. And I think, like,
unfortunately, when they're too high, it's very difficult. And me and this guy, we have very high standards because, like, we're not building something. Let's craft something very quickly. We're building something that's a brand that is that has a lot of good reputation.
Yeah, I honestly, man, at the end of the day, it just comes down to two things: either it's money or it's time. You can add people in the equation too. I'm stealing this from Stefan Arnio. But if you have more money to invest, then you're gonna have less problems.
Yeah, you're gonna hire people who are very smart, and you're gonna pay them a lot of money. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, this was very insightful. It's amazing. Thank you for coming. I knew this was gonna be great. I think that's our longest podcast ever, and this is fantastic.
I appreciate you guys having me, and like, anyone who's listening to this podcast, if they are in a situation, reach out to Anton and Ed. If there's anything I can help with, I'm always here too.
We'll get your information and we'll put it in all the description parts. And it's been amazing, man. I love the dynamic. Now we're doing this thing together, and I think it's fantastic. It's much more engaging, and we're gonna be coming back with a lot of other cool people. So thank you for listening, and thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, guys.